life is a mess and you're totally stressed out, just call Trent. Just call Trent. When your wife is cold as ice and you need some advice, just call Trent. Just call Trent. He'll shoot it straight and he won't say no. He'll just give you that advice and say, well, there you go.
Oh, hello and welcome to another episode of There You Go with Trent Mabry. I, of course, am your host, Trent Mabry, here in my boyhood home for the holidays, a beautiful background. Anyway, it's another special episode this week. I interviewed comedy writer Mike Rowe. Mike recently released a book called It's a Funny Thing. It's all about his journey from starting out as a stand-up comic, going to New York City, working his way up the comedy ladder, and eventually ending up writing for Futurama and a bunch of other great shows. We talk about all of that. We talk about what it was like hanging out at the original Improv in New York, what a writer's room is like. A lot of great advice if you're interested in being a comic. And I can't recommend the book enough. It's a funny thing. Probably the best book about starting out in comedy that I've read, and I've read a lot of them. So here it is, my interview with comedy writer Mike Rowe. So where'd you grow up?
East Coast, a little factory town in Connecticut called Waterbury.
Mm-hmm.
I was a kid right during that time when factories started closing down.
Mm-hmm.
Became like a depressed city. At a young age, I knew like there was more to the world than this little town.
Right. Yeah.
So that's why I discovered comedy when I was really small.
Mm-hmm. I was gonna ask, were you like a comedy nerd growing up? How'd you get into?
Yeah, I wanted to hang out with the cool kids. But I didn't want to smoke or drink or whatever the cool kids did. But I found out that they let me hang out with them if I was like really funny and made them laugh.
Right.
So it kind of started there,
Mm-hmm.
In fact, when I was, and this was like I was 10, 11, I don't know, and I was able to do this impression of a siren. And it was so loud that cars would actually pull over. And so if you're hanging out with friends on the corner and I would do that, that's like the greatest trick ever, because just to see cars like think they're hearing a siren and then pull over to the side of the road.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
And then, so like you're growing up, you realize you're funny. When did you like say, hey, I want to do stand up? You started when you were pretty young, right? 17 or?
Yeah. It's interesting too. I mean, I'm kind of a student of the old school, but the old school being two things actually, but I like the old time comedians, like Groucho and Jack Benny in that era. But then my school was when stand-up in the 70s first started to kind of show up on TV. So it was like the HBO special. So it's, it was Robert Klein, the young Robert Klein, and Jay Leno and Andy Kaufman. So when they started coming up, I was, 14, 15, and I saw like, okay, there's another place. Maybe I can bring what I think is funny. Maybe I can keep moving forward and progressing and do what they do. Kind of a turning point was there was a talk show that came out in the afternoons called the Mike Douglas Show.
Yeah.
Does that ring a bell at all?
Yeah, I know.
And they would do a co-host for a week. And the co-host was Freddie Prinze.
Okay, yeah.
Father of Freddie Prinze Jr., oddly enough. And we were about the same age at the time. And I'm home in Connecticut in my, my bedroom was in like a finished off paneled basement. And so Freddie Prinze started talking about this club, the Improv in New York, where he started. And they're showing clips of like this little, rat's hole with the brick wall and this dark room. And he's showing the different comedians that are starting there. And I'm like, wow, what is this? What's going on? What world?
Right.
I mean, that's how far back I go, where it's like people didn't even know what the Improv was.
Mm-hmm.
So, and everybody there was like my age and doing it. And New York was an hour and a half bus ride away. So it was about figuring out, well, how can I do that and get to that place? And, so that became the goal. So in the meantime, so we're talking about later 70s, right? So stand-up had yet to be this big thing. And because eventually in my hometown in the 80s, there was like 2 or 3 comedy clubs, actually, like,
Right, the big comedy boom in the 80s.
Right. And then, but when I was a kid, when I was a teenager and wanting to do this, there were no comedy spaces at all. People were like, what are we talking about? A comedy space?
Mm-hmm.
So I would literally go to bars that had a band playing, and I would go to like the manager or whatever of the place and say, when they go on a break, can I go up and tell jokes? And they're like, what? No, can I? And then a lot of the times they would let me do it. And just like this kid would just go up in front of these people and they're looking at me drinking. I'm like, what? And eventually there was a comedy competition at a place called the Ground Round. Ever hear of the Ground Round? Is that still around?
It sounds familiar, yeah.
But it was like a family restaurant, bar, and it was amateur night. And I wrote a routine with one of my friends from high school. We did like a duo. And we did this crazy loud routine. And first of all, the prize was like $50. And you get a little plastic baseball helmet full of ice cream and a t-shirt, whatever. Yeah. So that's what we were fighting for. But we were just doing it because it was just fun. Like we wrote this stupid little bit for the two of us, and we got like a standing ovation. And we're like, all right, so we're gonna go right to Hollywood from here,
right?
And get our own TV shows and that. And then we lost. We lost that night to a Tom Jones cover band.
Oh boy.
But the cool thing was, at the end of the night, the club owner hired us to come back every week.
Oh yeah.
And it was $50 a week for like the summer. So it's like, so I was getting all the right signals. Apparently, I was getting
right.
It was really encouraging. It really presents the idea of, even if it's not stand up, like if you fall in love with something as a career, if it's something you really want to do, you just figure out ways to do it.
Exactly.
You get creative of like, here's what I need to do. How do I do it? You don't wait for people to show you how to do it. You just like figure it out and fight for the way in. Now, do you do stand up?
I do, yeah.
Yeah. How long you been doing it?
7 years.
Oh, nice.
I started when I was 17 too.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And I just recently moved to New York. 4 months ago.
What part of town?
Upper West Side.
Oh, I was on West 54 and 9th.
Okay. Yeah, I'm on Amsterdam between 81st and 82nd.
Oh yeah. There was when I started, the comedy boom was just beginning. So but then there was maybe 400 comedians working comedians in the country.
Yeah.
So it felt like we owned the territory. And then when the boom hit, and I think it was a combination of so many things, of like TV specials with comedy clubs, HBO specials, Andy Kaufman and Robin Williams, and all those kind of specials where comics were being comics and getting to be who they want to be and say what they want to be. It wasn't the 4-minute, Merv Griffin afternoon shots anymore. And then as cities did comedy nights and all their bars and stuff like that, then more people were doing it,
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not exactly sure what the scene is like now. I know my son has been thinking about it, and it seems weird. It seems so different now because comics actually like went on strike when I was doing it so they can get a $9 cab fare.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's like you got to pay to go on stage.
Yeah,
You
it's
gotta
well,
bring your audience.
yeah, especially here. Like when I started in Indiana, so it's a big adjustment because you could just sign up for an open mic in Indiana and get on, and the person who booked the club would be watching the open mic. That's how they found the comics. But now when I moved to New York, it is a lot of like pay like $5 to do the open mics and stuff, and comics are watching. It's just comics. There's no like actual real audience members. So that's been an adjustment. And there's also probably like, you said there was four when you were starting out, there's 400 comics, there's probably 400 comics in my building.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't, it's weird. It's different. But again, I guess like everything else, you just kind of figure out, okay, what's the best way to take advantage of it and make that work,
Exactly. Yeah. So you were doing the spots, weekly spots at the Ground Round. When did you decide to make the move to New York?
I went to a technical high school, right? I was somehow deemed not college material, so it was recommended that I go to a what you call it, educational, a tech school. So I learned electronics, and I didn't go to college because they didn't think I should. And then, but I ended up working for NASA. I worked on a space shuttle out of high school.
Yeah.
And I kind of, like a lot of us, you kind of reach a crossroads in your life, right? So I was 18 or whatever. And so I kind of looked at like, all right, I have a great job, which could be a great career and a great life. I still have my high school girlfriend. So it's that part of your life where like, okay, this is going to suck me in pretty soon, and that this could be who I am for my life. It's going to happen. But I kept getting signs of like the stand-up comedy thing. I had to make a choice. I felt like I was right. And so at one point I just said, I'm going for it. I'm going for it. And I think that the thing that helped me really decide that was in Hartford, Connecticut. They had it was a stand-up comics competition. And the prize was you get to audition at the Improv in New York. And there was like 30 comics or something like that, but it wasn't even like, again, it was before the comedy boom, so there wasn't that many comics because there was one person who did contortions, and there was a juggler, and there was one guy that just talked like Steve Martin the whole time.
Yeah.
So I ended up winning. I got to audition at the Improv in New York, and that's kind of like, well, this is kismet and crazy. So a limo picks me up at my house, the week later, and drives my high school girlfriend and I to New York City. They take us out to dinner, all that stuff. And then I auditioned at the Improv, and it was like, the Improv was really starting to energize. So it was a full house. It was, they put me on right in the high point of the night. I'm like, oh man. But I ended up doing pretty well, where they said, okay, you passed auditions. So I'm like, really? But then I still lived in Connecticut. I was, what am I going to get on the bus every night for 2 hours in each way? So I eventually moved. There was a day manager at the Improv because I was coming in once a week, and I got to know the day manager there. And he said, you could stay at my apartment. I have an extra room, and so I just kind of stayed there. I just moved in, and, within a few months got my own place, and, found a job and all that stuff.
Who were the guys around when you were first starting there?
The people that were like graduating sort of into the next level, Seinfeld, Paul Reiser, Larry Miller. Do you know Larry Miller?
Oh yeah, I know Larry Miller. Yeah.
Who else was around that was kind of became?
Was Larry David around?
Larry was in LA doing that show Fridays.
Okay, yeah.
And then when that ended, he came back to New York, and he was hanging out with us around that time again. So he was back into the mix. So I got to know Larry pretty well.
What was his stand-up like? Because you always hear stories of if somebody said something in the audience, he would just storm off stage. Did you ever see anything like that?
Well, yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
Like whenever he was on stage, whenever he went up, there had to be another comic standing by because they just knew he could bail.
Right.
So I'm trying to think. Oh, so one night he actually went up and did great. He did a full set, and the audience really loved him. And then as he's walking in the bar, the audience is still applauding. I said, Larry, listen to that. They're still applauding for you. And he goes, yeah, but listen how they're applauding. So, you know.
Yeah.
And even like if somebody laughed at the wrong spot, he'd like, what are you laughing at? Why are you laughing at that? Andy Kaufman started hanging around back then. He and this is when I first started, and this was like, you know, I play the drums, so Andy needed a drum player for his Elvis impression on the improv stage. So, and the improv stage was, you know, about the size of a tabletop. So, but he squeezed up on stage. We had the drum set up there and the piano and all that stuff. So here I am, I'm like 18 or 19, whatever, and I'm playing the drums for Andy Kaufman for his Elvis thing, which was great. So then he had me referee a couple wrestling matches on that little stage. And they were like real women from the audience. It wasn't set up. And he would really get them pissed off and loved it. And I just kind of remember, like, you know, he's like, women should be home and cooking and cleaning and doing the ironing. And the women are like, and like this wall of mean women were building up to the stage. Like they wanted to just kill him. And then they talk to him in the bar, and then they'd want to go home and have sex with him. I don't understand the dynamics of that, but
yeah, that's crazy. So would he tell you like what to expect when you did that, or was it all like just up in the air?
There was not much except like, you know, if it looks like he pinned her, then to call it, you know. But it was so like this woman he took from the audience, he was literally slapping her around like a rag doll. I'm like, she's gonna get hurt and these women are gonna attack. And so I just like anything that looked like it was like she was pinned down, I just called it quick because I felt like somebody's just gonna get hurt.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So
when you're talking to him off stage, is he like a normal guy, or is he always in character?
Well, I felt kind of honored because, and this was the wrestling time where he was, I don't know if you know, when he was wearing the neck brace and all that stuff. So he would wear it all the time around the club. And I mean, this is how long ago it was. Letterman had a morning show.
Oh, yeah.
And he went on the show talking about how he got fired from Taxi. And he was unshaven and sniveling and kind of like, I got no money. If anybody has any money for me, I'll take it.
Yeah.
People were throwing money from the audience, and he wouldn't leave, and he had to be escorted by security out of the building. So then I saw him the next night, and I guess I felt honored because he actually broke character with me and said, yeah, I couldn't believe it. They thought it was real.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So that was cool.
Yeah. So how long were you doing like spots around the city and stuff before you decided, because you kind of in your book, which is great, by the way,
Thanks. Let's plug it. It's Christmas time.
Yeah, I have it here actually. I'll hold it up. It's a funny thing.
It's a funny thing how the professional comedy business made me fat and bald.
Yeah, it's great.
I think I wrote it because, first of all, I wrote it because I felt like at one point I was burning so much time like online, just looking at nothing and like buying shit on eBay, and like 2 or 3, like 4 hours would go by and I'm like, what did I just burned all this time on the internet. So I said, what if I did something constructive and different rather than just, tinker on the internet? So I said, well, let me do that instead. If I spent those same amount of hours doing something like that, what would I get out of it? So that was part of it. But I think also it's sort of an interesting journey, I think, for anyone who wants to do stand-up. And that's kind of why I wrote it. Because what I went through are sort of versions what anyone who wants to do stand-up can expect, or how to get past the rejection and the stupidity of the business, and just learning how to laugh at it and survive it and get to the next step, even though everybody tells you you shouldn't be doing that, or, just facing a lot of failure and then moving on from it, So it's also helpful in a way to anyone who's just trying to build their own career of like, you're going to be faced with idiots that tell you you're not good at it and you shouldn't be doing it, and what that really means, but just told in these real moments and stories of like these building blocks of getting to where I got,
Exactly.
So hopefully told in kind of a humorous way or a crazy way of, like those stories of, being a teenager and working in Times Square in 1980 and 80s in the porn theaters, using my electronics background from high school, going in to repair the projection equipment. But, going from a small town and then being introduced to the underbelly of 1980s New York City is like, holy shit, what the, so just seeing like live sex acts on stage and, and just this creepy, dirty, dark underworld, kind of a great introduction into the city. But it's like, all right, if these are things I have to go through to get what I want, it just tells you will go through it. If you love it enough, you'll get where you need to go.
Yeah, I've read a lot of like autobiographies and stuff from my comedians, and I thought yours was like the most realistic and helpful. Like it really shows the journey of starting out in stand-up and then working your way up to the rest of the business.
Because again, it was the great time. I remember doing 11 shows in one night. It just in Manhattan. So that was like when the boom was really hitting. So there was, a lot of comedy clubs in New York. So I could just take a cab pretty much down 9th Avenue all the way to the Village, and there would be, 6 clubs along the way. And then by the time I go back uptown, I can do the second shows of those places. Yeah. It took a lot of careful strategizing and all that sort of stuff, but it was a great time where, I had been around long enough. I did it really for 10 years from 80 to 90. But I also had another crossroads, and maybe if nothing else, I have a good instinct of like knowing when it's listening to like what my system is trying to tell me, because, when I was 25 or something like that, I kind of thought about, I don't like going on the road now. What's that going to be like when I'm 50? And I kind of knew I wasn't going to be George Carlin or, I wasn't going to be Rodney Dangerfield. So I just couldn't imagine like, being 55 and then being on a cruise ship for a week and all that sort of stuff. And I had been naturally transitioning into writing. I started writing jokes for Rodney Dangerfield. In fact, I'll tell the story in the book when I was 17, I used to like watching Rodney on The Tonight Show.
Yeah.
And I record it with my little cassette recorder and memorize the jokes and learn the rhythm and take the jokes apart and try to understand what made them funny and all that stuff. So much so that I felt like I could write those kind of jokes. And then Rodney Dangerfield was on the Tonight Show way back when Johnny Carson was doing the Tonight Show. But Carson actually got him to talk about his life a little bit for a minute. And he talked about a comedy club he had in Manhattan that I didn't know about called Dangerfield.
Mm-hmm.
And he also talked about how when he started in the Catskill Mountains, he went by the name of Jack Roy.
Right.
So my little, tech brain, the wheels were turning, and I thought, what if I wrote a page of jokes for him, since I seemed to know, at least thought I knew what made him tick, but sent it to Dangerfield's Comedy Club and sent him in care of Jack Roy.
Yeah.
That will get his attention.
Right.
And sent him in, got my mom's typewriter, clumsily typed, 10 or 12 jokes that I think I put a couple in the book, actually, I forget. But, and I, of course, a couple weeks go by and I don't hear anything, and I kind of forgot about it. And then one night after dinner, and I'm down in my paneled basement, and the phone rings. My mom picks it up upstairs, and then she's at the top of the stairs. Like, Mike, there's a Rodney on the phone for you. What? No, is it Rodney? I pick up like, hello? Hey, Mike, it's Rodney. How you doing? You okay? You all right? Hey, how are you? I'm like, what? Hey, I read your jokes. They're pretty good. They're all right. I like the jokes. So he was very encouraging to me, and told me about the whole comedy scene in New York and what I need to do to get there. And he said it's going to take 8 years before you even know what's funny about yourself. But when you're 17 and Rodney's calling you at your home as a kid, it's really a lot of the encouragement. What more encouragement do you need?
Exactly.
Yeah. So that was great, but it was also too the beginning of me learning how to write. I mean, as a stand-up, you learn to write for yourself, but I was also learning how to write for other people.
Yeah.
So the writing thing was happening kind of naturally because of the stand-up boom, there was a lot of stand-up comedy TV shows, and they all wanted like little comedy sketches and wraparounds and stuff like that. There was a show called Caroline's Comedy Hour in the 80s. Yeah. And they figured they had use of these comics and said, let's do little bits around the club and stuff like that and put them in between. So that was fun, writing for, so my first, I was writing stuff with Jon Stewart and Ray Romano and, way back when we were kids, basically. Yeah,
that's great. So so you're writing that stuff, and then you decide to try to write some spec scripts for like Newhart and It's Gary Shandling's show.
Yeah. So I kind of figured the best way to become a half-hour writer was to just write scripts, just write them, just keep writing and writing. So I wrote, at the time, my favorite show was the second Newhart show called Newhart.
Yeah, it's great.
Took place in Vermont. And then It's Gary Shandling show, which is before Larry Sanders.
Yeah.
So I just, also too, I like recorded those on cassette tapes and just listened to the audio of it over and over. Just to hear it kind of burn into my brain, listen to the rhythm of it, what sort of helped, I learned of like, if you take kind of the visual out of it and then just listen to it in your head, it makes it a little easier to write in a way.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and I didn't have a computer. I still had my mom's typewriter with me to New York City. So it was literally, typing and then with the whiteout and fixing it was crazy. And having to go to the corner copier to make copies of the script and all that stuff. And it somehow, how did I get, I was writing, freelance jokes for Weekend Update when Dennis Miller was there. So I was hanging around the show on Saturdays, and Alan Zweibel was hanging around, and Alan Zweibel was one of the original writers of SNL, and he coincidentally was co-creator of It's Gary Shandling Show, and I had just written these like 3 spec scripts. And I said, I love that show so much, and I used it to teach myself how to write. And he said, you know what, send me the best of the 3, the one you think is the best, and I'll read it. And I'll just give you some input. I can't promise you anything. And he read it and liked me so much that he brought me to Hollywood to not work on that show, but he had another show in between seasons of It's Gary Shandling Show. So his show was called The Boys, and it was about the Friars Club and the people who hung out there, the old duffers.
Yeah.
And I forget who was in it. Norm Crosby. Do you know who that is?
Yeah, I know Norm Crosby. Yeah.
Norman Fell.
Oh yeah, from the Three's Company.
Lionel Stander, who was in that show Heart to Heart. Remember Heart to
Yeah.
Heart? But all these old timers, and it was about them hanging out at this club and playing cards and all that sort of stuff, which was also in my wheelhouse, like that old school comedy stuff. So that brought me into LA, and suddenly I'm like, what happened? I'm a writer now. How did this come about?
Yeah. So when you're writing your spec scripts, did you feel like you had a good handle on like breaking down the story, or do you learn? How did you feel like? How good were your spec scripts? Like how many drafts and how long did it take?
In a way, they were kind of easier to write then for me than they are now, because now there's like 1,000 things that are supposed to happen or shouldn't happen, or there's guidelines you should follow. And so there was something nice in the freedom of not really knowing what you're doing, which just kind of listening, just knowing the basics of it at that time. There's the middle act break and that sort of stuff, and the page count and the format on the page. But so there was just freeing of like, all right, I just know something where it has to happen in the middle and then resolve everything at the end without changing the characters, just some of the basics. So so they probably went through less drafts than what I write now.
Yeah.
And the thing that really got a lot of work for me after I was out here is, like everybody else, when Seinfeld was hot, every single writer did a spec Seinfeld. And so I wrote one, and it was an interesting lesson in writing what because I wrote one based on stuff that really happened to me in New York City, and just kind of went from there. My bike was stolen. I had it locked in the hallway outside my door, and like I figured, who's gonna,
Right.
And then I noticed it in the bikes of a restaurant for their deliveries guys.
Yeah. I'm
like, what? So I thought, that would be a great story for Kramer, like figuring out how to get his bike back. But I also would go to this diner every day and have my breakfast. And I liked going there because there was this older waitress who would always be very attentive to me. And, my coffee cup was always full. And this, I was 26 or something, I forget, but she was in her 60s. And I found out she had a crush on me. So she literally said, like, she eventually started calling me at home, and it got really weird. So that kind of fit right in with Seinfeld, where what if George can't go to his favorite diner because there's a waitress there that has a crush on him? And then, think about that kind of stuff in your life as a jumping off point, and then you'd make it crazier. Like for the Seinfeld story, then I thought, because Seinfeld says, you just talk to her. She's a person, work it out. You can't keep running. And then the next scene, George is upset and pacing, and what happened? And they ended up having sex. And then George is upset because now she's not calling him anymore.
That's funny.
So that script got me work for like 3 years. So also too, and I guess if your audience is a lot of comedians or writers or whatever, but the secret to it though too is to if you want to be a writer, if you don't see yourself writing almost every single day, writing something or starting something, or then you're probably in trouble, unless you're that exception of someone who's very gifted and can write a script on the spot and do great. But if and I don't know if you were ever thinking of pursuing that or changing that, but it's just, you have to really feel compelled to just want to write all the time and not, there's some writers that actually know that, like, well, why should I write something if I'm not getting paid? And it's like, because you're a writer and you just write,
Exactly. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So at the Boys is like your first time in a writer's room. Like when you're doing freelance jokes for SNL, you're kind of writing by yourself, right? You're not in a room with other comedy writers. Or
Yeah. It was a difficult transition, because it's compared to stand-up in a way, but stand-up, I always felt comfortable because I feel like the audience is not there in a weird way. I mean, they always feel like they're there to me, but for some reason it didn't feel as weird if it wasn't going well. Where if you're in a comedy room with 8 or 10 people, it's like close-up comedy. It's like you're sitting at the dinner table with family. So if you're being funny and it's not working, you kind of feel it more for some reason. You just
that makes sense to me.
Because you can see their faces of them like trying to either be nice or roll.
Yeah, they're also your peers, like the comedy club audience.
Right.
but you don't want to be judged by your peers. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how'd you so the Boys, and then you like go on to write for like a bunch of sitcoms like the Nanny and then Coach and some other shows. Then you go on to write Futurama.
Yes. That has been my favorite job so far, I'd have to say. And it's interesting how one thing oddly connects to the other, and it's also a lesson in, like, if you're in this business, even if it's a stand-up or a writer, it's like finding the community of people, of like minds and doing the same thing, and then it sort of generates connections with other people that you find out about other things that are happening. And but it's weird. Futurama came about in a weird way because Bob Odenkirk and I wrote a movie, and it was based on the old school Black exploitation movies of the 70s. Because he and I and a couple other people like David Cross, we would almost every Friday find the worst, craziest Black exploitation movies. We would just like have these screenings of this stuff, and we thought it was hilarious.
Yeah.
So we thought, as a movie, what if these movie nerds got thrown into a 70s Black exploitation movie, and it's their journey about getting out. So we actually sold it to Warner Brothers back then, and it didn't get made, but that's how it goes.
Right.
And so right at that time, Eddie Murphy had a show called The PJs, and they were looking for writers, and a 70s Black exploitation script would be kind of the perfect sample. So that got me on The PJs. And so during that time, there used to be a yearly writers get together at this bowling alley. They would we'd all kind of donate money to this cancer society, and we get to go to this event. And I ran into David Cohen there, who was the co-creator of Futurama. And it turned out he loved the PJs, and they would have Futurama, Easter eggs in the episodes and stuff like that. And I was kind of like, yeah, it looks like we're shutting down. No, it's the last season and a couple more episodes. And then he tracked me down not long after that to see if I was available, you know?
Yeah.
So I think it was the PJ street cred that got him. And then when I met with him and Matt Groening, you know, for the job, so there was that. And then once I started talking about working for NASA and working on the space shuttle, it was like,
oh yeah,
you know, here's your office right over here.
right.
You know, that really excited them.
And then you said like in the book they would break down episodes like with math equations basically.
Which I couldn't follow in some of them half the time, but when it was really about the more complicated shows. There were math theorems and all this sort of stuff that and then some were incorporated into episodes, and they're really functioning math theorems created by Ken Keeler that help. They're used in colleges to help students learn about math. They you know, use those episodes to get their attention and get them invested.
Oh yeah.
So, but yeah, it was an interesting room because, you know, working on like Coach and those shows, it would be, you know, discussions about where we're going to lunch and who had what parties over the weekend and who wasn't invited, you know, just stupid stuff. But at Futurama, it was, you know, discussions about the perpetual motion machine and, you know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it was interesting though, too, because it's like, how did I get into a room with a bunch of Harvard guys when I didn't even go to college? You know, so I kind of pat myself on the back once in a while for that.
Yeah.
But they really knew I was, you know, a good joke guy for them. But I also was, you know, I brought a lot of emotion to episodes. There was one based on something that, again, it's, you know, when you can draw on stuff from your real life, those end up kind of being the better things. But when my mom's mother passed away, she didn't really get over it until she had a dream of her mom saying goodbye to her in a dream, and then she got over it. And then it made me think that, you know, when Fry was thrust into the 2,000 years into the future, he didn't really get to say goodbye to his mom. So the episode was like the professor created this dream machine where he can trace his dream and go back and have that moment with his mom. And I don't know how much you watched the show, but he got to say goodbye to her in a dream, but it turns out it was his mom dreaming of him and saying goodbye to him. So it was one of those, you know, high-rated emotional episodes, you know.
Right.
Hold on, I'm choking.
That's all right. So yeah, that's a great episode. So how similar are all writers' rooms? Are they all different? Or are there a lot of similarities?
Some I find for me are more difficult than others, you know, because for me it's weird because I could be on one show and be like the king of the room. I could be the guy the go-to guy that figures out all the problems, and then literally go to another show that I don't connect to, and I'm like, I suddenly have become the quiet guy. You know, it's something I haven't quite figured out, and I think, you know, someone who wants to be a writer has to know how to adjust to the different rooms. So the harder rooms for me though are there's ones that can be very not political, but a lot of times the showrunner could be sort of like, and I don't know if it comes out of insecurity or what, but they're just kind of, he or she can be kind of just tough, you know, like you're pitching jokes and they're like, really, you're gonna pitch that? You're gonna really, you know, it's like, really, why are you? So when it gets to that kind of stuff, I don't do great, but you know, but when I'm in rooms like Futurama, David Cohen, who ran the room, was always about, you know, anybody could say anything, you know, I'm open to all things, and it was never even, you know, he was secure enough where he never, you know, went after anybody for what he thought was a bad pitch or stupid idea or, you know, that sort of thing. So So, but some people are fine when the showrunner is like over the top, kind of an asshole. But I just don't do well in those rooms.
So when you're when you're writing for a show like that, how do you navigate? Because you have the job, you still have to deal with it. How would you navigate being in a writer's room like that?
Good question. Sometimes it gets very hard for me to pitch stuff and get into the mix of it, but I just kind of fight my way through. But it gets so stressful. It's like why am I even here? Why am I doing this? I was on one sitcom that I got the job, but I didn't really watch the show that much until I got the job. Then I started looking at episodes much more closely, and I'm like, oh my God. To me, it was so bad that I just started like pounding my desk, like, what am I gonna do? Oh.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's trying to think of what lessons are learned there, but it's I guess it's just everybody's different. Some people can just easily adapt to any sort of style, but if it's a show I don't connect to, it's just going to be rough.
Yeah, that makes sense. There in the book, you tell a story about how you, of course, I love Gary Shandling. You got offered to, I can't remember how it came about, but
the Larry Sanders.
Yeah.
Of course, I fell in love with the Larry Sanders Show.
Yeah.
I mean, that was fantastic. And I don't even know how my script got over there, but one of the executive producers called me and says, I found one of your scripts here and we think it's really good. Do you want to come over and meet with us? And I'm like, well, yes. They had a job of winning. It was the very beginning of the series. I think it was like they were partway into the first season. So I hadn't seen the show. I just knew about it. And did I see it? I don't remember. Maybe no, you know what? I didn't see it yet. So I showed up and they called me in the office. There was an exec producer who I didn't know. I never met him before. And said, we're going to show you the pilot episode. Yeah, so I had not seen it. I got excited about it because it was Shandling, and it was, then I cut my teeth on the It's Gary Shandling show.
Yeah.
So they showed me the pilot, and of course it's great. It's fantastic. But he says, I'll show it to you. I'll come back. We'll talk about it. And I also felt like as I'm watching it, I should have tell them how great it is and all that stuff, but have at least in the chamber a couple of thoughts of well, how could you make it better? Just this. Hopefully I didn't have to use it, but I feel like maybe they think I'm so professional I can whatever. So sure enough, he came back and I said how great it was, and then he asked, was there anything you do differently? And it was literally as innocent as I think one idea was, when you do the talk show segments, you should go in tighter, just copy the Tonight Show shots, it seems a little far away and, something like that. One or two things like that, literally. And he goes, those are good ideas. Let's go down on the set and tell Gary. Tell him what? And he's bringing me down onto the stage, and they're in the middle of taping an episode, walking, and I ran into Janine Garofalo, who was in the show at the time, and she and I were close friends back then. She's like, what are you doing here? And I said, I don't know. I came to interview for a writer. And so we get to the set, and Larry's in his fake office there, and they're putting makeup on it. It's between shots. And the producer who brought me down said, hey Gary, this is Mike. He wants to be a writer on the show. He's got some ideas to make it better. And Shandling just kind of turned around slowly. He's like, oh yeah, is that right? Yeah. All right. I'm like, what? I remember David Spade was the episode on the set, and he kind of looked at me like, what? God. And so needless to say, that was the end of that.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I still don't understand it to this day. Did he like sabotage me? Like,
yeah, that's what yeah. Did he think it was a good idea to, yeah, it's
because the
weird.
guy that read my script and liked it and who called me was not the guy I met with. So I don't know, was like that guy maybe didn't want me there because he had someone else. I don't know, or just who knows? I mean, it's just it's just the kind of showbiz shit that you gotta put up with, you know?
Right. Yeah. So later on, you started doing some like show. You became a showrunner for some shows. What's the difference between being a showrunner and just writing for the show?
You just kind of have to be the parent in the room, you know. And for me, knowing what I'm sensitive to when I'm the writer, taking orders from the showrunner, and you know, I'm sort of like David Cohen. I used him more as the model because that's more of who I am. It's like I'm open to everything, and there's no bad pitches, and it's whatever you need to do to make this fun, so to keep everybody loose, to keep everybody wanting to keep pitching and talking and get into the process, rather than being that guy who shuts people down. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just not who I am anyway. But so I just try to make it fun and productive. You know, you have to kind of wrangle sometimes, but you know, it's you have the final say. So you're the one really building it from the ground up. So I'm the guy who has to take everything in and process it and use my point of view and everything else to build it out. But I've had fun doing that. And YouTube Red came to me when they first started producing their own shows. And they said, we kind of have this pilot idea, you know, we don't have any money, a lot really. We don't have anybody with that much experience. Can you kind of build this from the ground up? And it was a crazy challenge because they literally had no one with any experience. So it was a great learning process of like, now you have to use everything you've ever learned in the business to help build this thing out of nothing. And it was a great, fun experience, but it never it got on and there was a lot of people were into it, but it just never looked and felt right because there were just not enough people with the right experience. And the animation house, nobody had directed anything before, and you know, but it was good for me because it's like, all right, I have to see what I know about directing and how to do this, and you know, so
that's great. We'll wrap up with this. What's the best piece of advice you would give someone that's just starting out in comedy?
If you need to be obsessed with it. You know, if you're not obsessed, you know, it's always a struggle to want to sit down and work, whether you need to write more stand-up or fight to get on stage and all that stuff. But if you feel like it's just sort of a part-time, you know, whatever happens, you're going to be in trouble. You have to kind of become obsessed with it and find that right ladder you want to climb, and just focus on that and just, you know, visualize where you want to be. You know? But yeah, you need to kind of be obsessed with it, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, thanks so much for doing this, Mike. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. You can remind them of the book again, you know.
Yeah. It's called It's a Funny Thing.
It's a wonderful journey. You can learn about life's lessons, not even if you're not in the business.
Yeah, it's great. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks,
Mike. It was good to talk to you.
Same here.
Hey baby, I hear the blues are calling. Tossed salads and scrambled eggs. Mercy. And maybe I seem a bit confused. Yeah, maybe. But I got you pegged. But I don't know what to do with those tossed salads and scrambled eggs. They're calling again.
Scrambled eggs all over my face. What is a boy to do? Mabry has left the building.